Nearly 2 years before 9/11, America's largest intelligence agency was tracking 3 of the al-Qaeda hijackers, but the information obtained by the National Security Agency wasn't analyzed in a way that would uncover the plot. Inside the super-secret NSA, several analysts and managers believed that the agency had a powerful tool that might have had a chance to head off 9/11, but it wasn't used. One of those agency insiders was Thomas Drake, who thought that taxpayer money was being wasted on useless intelligence-gathering projects while promising technology was ignored. Drake tried to get the word out, but now, as a result, he's been charged under the Espionage Act and could spend the rest of his life in prison. The government says he betrayed his country. Tom Drake says the only thing he betrayed was NSA mismanagement that undermined national security.
The story will continue in a moment.
After a long career in U.S. intelligence, Tom Drake never imagined he'd be labeled an enemy of the United States. As a young airman, he flew spy missions in the Cold War. In the Navy, here with President Clinton, he analyzed intelligence for the Joint Chiefs at the Pentagon. Later, he worked for defense contractors in the highly technical world of electronic eavesdropping. He became expert in sophisticated top-secret computer software and ultimately rose in 2001 to a senior executive job at the National Security Agency.
My first day on the job was 9/11.
Your first day on the job was 9/11?
It was 9/11. NSA went into immediate crisis management mode. We had failed to protect the United States of America.
You felt that was a failure of the National Security Agency?
The entire national security establishment. It was a failure, a fundamental systemic breakdown.
Part of the failure at the National Security Agency was in its old technology. These pictures from 60 Minutes in 2001 represent one of the only times cameras have ever been allowed inside the NSA. The NSA eavesdrops on the communications of the world, but in the 1990s, it was becoming ineffective, overwhelmed by the explosion of digital data.
Vast volumes of data streaming across all kinds of different networks, wired, wireless, phones, computers, you name it.
And what does that look like to NSA coming into their building in Maryland?
Choking on it. They're just incredible amounts. How do you keep, even just storing it was becoming a challenge.
Most of what the agency collected went unanalyzed, including clues pointing to 9/11. Kirk Wiebe and Bill Binney were career NSA intelligence analysts who were working on the problem.
We were greatly saddened and shocked by 9/11, but it didn't come as a total surprise. We knew there was a vulnerability, a lack of understanding of the data that put NSA in a weak position.
Recognizing that vulnerability in the late 90s, Bill Binney, a legendary NSA mathematician, led development of a revolutionary computer system to collect, isolate, and connect important information like phone calls and financial transactions. Its code name was ThinThread.
ThinThread was fundamentally dedicated to collecting and processing and ultimately analyzing the vast streams of digital data. It was a breakthrough solution.
Binney was pushing to use it even before the attack on America.
We proposed it for January of 2001.
9 months before 9/11.
Right.
Now, there is no answer to this next question because we'll never know. But if ThinThread had been deployed worldwide at the point that it was ready, is there a chance that information could have been picked up that might have headed off 9/11?
Indeed.
Absolutely, yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. We had planned on going after all the appropriate targets at the time.
Al-Qaeda, Osama bin Laden, Ayman al-Zawahiri, these were targets that you intended to focus ThinThread on. Is that correct?
Yes. Oh, I mean the whole terrorist network, yeah.
And if you had been able to do that?
Well, we would have gotten the data, whatever that was there.
I believe it's very likely that, at least from the NSA perspective, the critical intelligence related to Al-Qaeda and associated movements would have been detected and reported.
It was a chance.
It's one of the great tragedies in the history of NSA. What could have been.
After 9/11, Tom Drake felt America was threatened as long as Thin Thread was confined to the lab. But others at NSA doubted that Thin Thread was up to the job, and one of them was Lieutenant General Michael Hayden, the head of the agency. Hayden wanted to transform the NSA and launched a massive modernization program codenamed Trailblazer. It was supposed to do what Thin Thread did and a whole lot more. Trailblazer would be the NSA's biggest project. Hayden's philosophy was to let private industry do the job. Enormous deals were signed with defense contractors. Bill Binney's Thin Thread program cost $3 million. Trailblazer would run more than $1 billion and take years to develop. Do you have any idea why General Hayden decided to go with Trailblazer as opposed to Thin Thread, which already existed?
I believe he was convinced by others that going with a large-scale industrial strength solution was the approach that NSA needed to take. You can't really understand why they would make that kind of a decision without understanding the culture of NSA.
Help me understand it.
Careers are built on projects and programs. The bigger, the better the career.
This might be just another Washington tale of competing defense projects and disgruntled losers, except the winner in this case, Trailblazer, was in trouble from the start. Contractors burned through hundreds of millions of dollars over years and still couldn't give the NSA the capability it so urgently needed. As cost overruns soared and deadlines were broken, Tom Drake complained to his superiors. And then, privately, he informed the intelligence committees on Capitol Hill. He sought out Diane Rourke, the top Republican staffer on the House Intelligence Committee, who was responsible for overseeing the NSA.
First, he tried internally, trying to get things changed. He had gone to Congress. He went to the Senate as well as the House.
He went by the book?
He went by the book internally.
But Rourke says that in the years after 9/11, congressional committees were reluctant to kill any intelligence program, even one as mismanaged as Trailblazer. So Rourke, Bill Binney, and Kirk Wiebe took an extraordinary step. They filed a confidential complaint with the Department of Defense Inspector General, calling for an investigation of Trailblazer and Thin Thread. Tom Drake volunteered to be a witness.
Why did we launch the IG complaint? Out of total abject frustration, knowing that we had something so important to share and thought we had witnessed wrongdoing that needed to be addressed.
For 2 years, Drake was the most important witness for the Inspector General, but in the end, the Department of Defense investigation was stamped classified, which hid the Trailblazer debacle from public view. As his frustration grew, Drake says that he was shocked to learn about something else that was happening at the agency post 9/11. He learned of a top-secret NSA program that became known as warrantless wiretapping.
It was no longer necessary to follow the law. A huge Pandora's box had been opened up.
On orders from the White House, the NSA was listening in on people in the United States without a warrant from a judge.
And this is where I began to have grave concerns about the decisions that were made to bypass the Constitution willfully and deliberately as a result of 9/11. I took my grave concerns up with the general counsel at NSA. I spoke with one of their lead attorneys. He said, "Don't worry about it, Tom. It's all legal."
It was legal because the White House said it was legal?
Yes.
After 4 years of reporting through proper channels, Drake noticed that the Baltimore Sun newspaper had begun a series of articles about trouble at the NSA.
There's one final step that could be taken, but it was fraught with significant risk.
Anonymously, Drake contacted Baltimore Sun reporter Siobhan Gorman and became an unnamed source for her articles, starting with this one about Thin Thread, headlined, "NSA Shelved Better Program That Sifted Calls." Another article told readers that mismanagement at NSA continued years after 9/11. Did you ever communicate classified information to Siobhan Gorman?
Did not.
Not once ever.
Not once ever. That was one of the fundamental rules, whether it was oral communication, whether it was written, electronic, or later on even in hard copy, it was all unclassified, period.
But after those articles, the FBI raided the homes of all the people you've met in this story who filed that confidential complaint with the Defense Department asking for the Trailblazer investigation.
They came busting in. I was in the shower at the time, and one of them came running up and was pointed a gun at my eyeballs and pulled me out of the shower. So
he drew a gun on you?
Yeah, he had it pointed at my head, yeah.
But only Drake was charged. He's being advised by the Government Accountability Project, a Washington legal organization that defends whistleblowers. Drake told us that he knew he'd violated a confidentiality agreement with the NSA, and he thought he might lose his job. But the prosecutors charged him under the Espionage Act, not for divulging classified information, but for taking classified papers home without permission. He faces up to 35 years.
How does a man see 9/11 happen, know that some part of it is due to corruption and mismanagement, and sleep at night? How does a man do that? He obviously couldn't.
Prosecutors declined to talk with us, citing the pending case against Drake, so we asked Washington attorney Abby Lowell what the prosecution is trying to prove and what Drake's potential defense would be. Lowell is not connected to the case, but he is one of the most experienced lawyers in the Espionage Act.
From the government and the prosecution's point of view, it's an important case to state that if you're a government person, and if you've signed a confidentiality agreement and you've got a security clearance based on your promise to keep our secret secret, then you don't get the right as an individual to decide when that secret should be kept or not because you've decided that the government is right or wrong about something it wants to do. To the people who are saying this is basically clamping down on information that the public has the right to know about whistleblowing, it's important because it will see whether or not if a person has the right motives, has the right intent, whether that is a defense that will work to prevent what is a very, very harsh statute with very harsh penalties if he were to be convicted.
Some people watching this interview are thinking to themselves in this moment, look, he knew what he was doing. He'd been trained, he'd been in the Air Force, he'd been in the Navy, he'd had a top security clearance for many, many years. He knew reaching out to a reporter was wrong under any rules, under any circumstances, and he deserves what he's getting.
Some have said that. On the other hand, I was an employee with the U.S. government, charged with supporting and defending the Constitution, ensuring that the best of America was put in the fight, ensuring that we did so legally, responsibly, and accountably.
Ultimately, the Trailblazer Project chewed through more than $1.2 billion and then was canceled. The NSA and its former head, General Hayden, declined to comment for this story. Hayden retired, but in 2006, the day the Baltimore Sun ran one of its articles, he said this to Congress.
A lot of the failure in the Trailblazer program was in the fact we were trying to overachieve, and that a lot of the failure was we were trying to do too much all at once.
After the Trailblazer fiasco, Congress revoked NSA's authority to manage large projects for 5 years. Thomas Drake goes on trial next month.
Why do you think you were charged under the Espionage Act? That's pretty rare.
To send a chilling message.
To whom?
To other whistleblowers, to others in the government, not to speak out or speak out. Do not tell truth to power. We'll hammer you.